Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Dealing with Difficult Colleagues and Employees, brought to you by your Vanderbilt Alumni Association. I'm Lauren Overstead, Executive Director of Alumni and Student Engagement, and I'm so glad you could join us from wherever you are this afternoon. Today's webinar will last around 45 minutes, with time at the end for questions. Please feel free to type your questions as you have them in the questions box on the side panel of your screen throughout the presentation, and we'll make sure those are addressed in some way before time is up. We'll also have two different polls at different times where you'll be able to let us know your answers via the same dashboard. We will record today's webinar and post it on our expert advice webpage. I'll also send you an email with the link as well later this week. Many of you know our presenter today from previous offerings here at Vanderbilt, and I'm really excited that she's back with us for this presentation. Hallie Crawford is a certified career coach based in Atlanta, Georgia. Her company, HallieCrawford.com, and team of coaches have helped thousands of people nationwide uncover their dream career and make it a reality. Hallie is regularly featured as a career expert in the media, including Forbes.com, Wall Street Journal, CNN, AJC, and Fox Business News. I'm excited to turn this afternoon's presentation over to Hallie. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for being here. And thanks, Lauren. That was perfect. So I am thrilled to be here with you all today. And I am a Vandy alum as well. So this is always near and dear to my heart to speak with fellow alum as well. And I'm sure we all can relate, right, about the topic today or to the topic today, because I have had to deal with difficult coworkers and employees as well myself. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So why is this topic important? It's important in part because of what I just said, right? That we have all, I think, in some way, shape, or form, had to deal with someone difficult in the workplace, okay? And here are, if you take a look at these statistics here on this slide, there are a lot of statistics about workplace conflict. Research shows that 60 to 80% of difficulties in organizations can actually stem from strained relationships between employees, not just about people's skill or motivation or work performance. Communication is such an important part to our work performance and the professional environment. And the typical manager can spend 25 to 40% of their time having to deal with workplace conflicts, which is kind of a pain. It's a lot. And we're going to go ahead and dive right in here. And Lauren, if you can start to get this poll set up. The deal is that with a typical manager, if it's that much of their time, that can be 1 to 2 days of every work week. And they really should be spending their time doing other things, as you can imagine, okay? And it's not just something that HR always has to deal with, right? We all have to deal with in some way, shape, or form. We have to work with our coworkers, of course, and we all have to deal with on a relatively regular basis someone who tends to be more difficult, who doesn't communicate maybe as effectively, who doesn't have our same values, whatever it is. So it's a common problem, which is why we're here today. So let's take this first poll. How many on the call today have had to deal with a difficult coworker or employee? I'm sure this is probably going to be a high percentage here, but part of why we wanted to do this is I want you all to understand and realize that you're not alone, that this is a common problem and that there are solutions to figuring it out. So Lauren, let us know when we get that done.
I can tell you now that it's 100% yes.
Okay. So good in the sense that you all should know that you're not alone. Bad that it's something that it is so common, okay? So let's go ahead and keep talking here about this particular topic, but I want you to know that because other people deal with this often, I would start talking to your friends, your family, other coworkers too, about how to deal with this as well to get some additional ideas. So here's the deal. First of all, I want you to know that we understand the importance of this issue because we have had clients who want to be better managers or want to have better relationships with their coworkers, all the way to clients who have been, honestly, in toxic work situations because of either communication or harassment issues. It's really unfortunate, but I would say at least 1 out of 3 of every one of our clients has been in a really bad work environment for them, whether it's their boss, is, harassing them or just kind of somewhat abusive, if you will, or if it's the work environment and there's unethical behavior. There's lots of different issues that can come up. And the culture of an organization, as we have, know after doing this for 17 years, is critically important to your satisfaction at work. And we coach clients using these coaching skills that I'm going to show you today all the time, because it helps them improve the environment that they are in, which is a critical piece to having fulfillment and satisfaction in your work. So it's not just about, gosh, like, feeling frustrated one day or angry the next. It impacts your overall satisfaction in your career path in the long run. So that's part of why it's so important. Okay. So let's take a look at our ideal career model. And I just wanted to kind of reiterate what we were talking about just a second ago, how work environment is a make or break for your career. So if you take a look at this, these are all the different pieces in terms of your career path that need to be present or accounted for in order for you to be in the right fit career-wise. You need to have a sense of fulfillment. You need to be leveraging in some way, shape, or form your education or your experience to at least be qualified for it and feel like, you're leveraging that past experience. You need to leverage your strengths on a regular basis in order to feel satisfied. Have a sense of enjoyment from the tasks that you perform. And if you look up here, your personality type is really important. You need to consider that too, whether you're more introverted versus extroverted and how that impacts the right role and work environment for you. But if you take a look over here, the work environment is critically important too, as well as clearly compensation. And I wanted to tell you all, like, we've had clients that are in the right fit career-wise, and they have all of these pieces in place. They're in the right role. They're working with some great people. But if the work environment is out of whack, even if everything else on this model is in place, it can be a make or break for their job and they leave it. I had a client once at Ernst & Young in Chicago, and at first when she came to us, she was like, "Oh, Hallie, I just can't stand my job. I need to go be a chef." She wanted to be something completely different. But when we took a look at it using this model and really thinking it through for her, she discovered that truly, actually, she was leveraging her strengths. She was doing what she loved. She loved, their clients, and she really enjoyed her employees. It was really her boss was the only thing that was making her miserable, because everything else was actually a fit when we double checked it. And she ended up leaving that organization. It's a great organization. It was just that one person, but instead to go work at a company as an internal advisor, a business strategist instead. So work environment, everybody, is a make or break for your career, which is part of why this is such a critical issue. Okay. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to talk about coaching and how we define that, so that I can kind of show you how we describe it to our clients and give you kind of the framework, if you will, for how to think about these tools and skills that we're going to use and talk about today. Then second, we're going to talk about 3 critical communication skills that will help you deal with difficult people. We're going to give you some resources, and I do want you all to walk away with at least 2 action items that you will take action on in the next week in order to make this happen. I don't know about you, but I've gone to webinars like this before, or presentations or whatever, and right afterwards I'm like, yes, I'm really excited and ready to go. And then life happens. My phone rings, my son gets sick, whatever happens, and I don't always take action on it. So I want you all to write this down as we get closer to the end to ensure that you've got at least 2 tangible action items. And if you would like a copy of this presentation as a PDF, I'm happy to email it to you. If you will just send me an email at hallie@halliecrawford.com, so that you don't feel like you have to be frantically writing. As a reminder, though, remember that Lauren is going to send you the recording as well. Okay. All right, so let's dive into coaching defined. So the first piece here on our agenda is how we define coaching, okay? So it's basically helping someone learn in order to improve their performance. And the deal with coaching, as some of you may already know, it's not really about telling them what to do and giving instructions. Coaching in its truest form is supposed to be about helping, showing, giving feedback, explaining something, and encouraging someone. So it's more typically about asking questions versus giving advice. I have now moved into the consulting range as well. So for me as a career coach, I give advice now too. But for the purposes of this, presentation, I want you, especially when we're thinking about, dealing with difficult coworkers, I want you to kind of step back a little bit and try to get more into asking questions mode versus telling what to do, because sometimes our frustration level can get kind of high and we start to want to, tell them what to do or let that anger out or whatever it is. And we want to shift gears into asking questions and being more coach-like is the idea, okay? And just really quickly, coaching as a profession has always been around. It was more formalized in the early 90s during the recession. And with the uptick in, personal development interests, people like, Stephen Covey and Tony Robbins and all of that, like coaching has been around in some way, shape, or form. But obviously now it's much more defined kind of as a profession. So the reason why we want you to start thinking about or leveraging or using coaching skills to improve your communication in the workplace is several things here, and I'll show you this slide. It will help you develop several things that helps with building better relationships with coworkers, okay? It helps you develop that trust. It will help you trust between that other person, okay? Them trusting you and kind of vice versa. It helps you develop greater empathy. Sometimes when people are frustrated and being difficult, something else is going on for them that we don't even know about, and it doesn't have to do with us. So we can have a little bit more empathy sometimes as well for what may be going on with them outside of the workplace or even inside of it. It will help us develop better tone and how we present what we have to say or a question we have to ask. And also it fosters greater honesty in the workplace and feedback, okay? So here's the thing. We always want in coaching school, they always want us to, like I said a moment ago, like be a little bit better at less giving advice and really be better at listening and supporting versus advising and fixing, okay? I want you all to keep in mind that you might have some great advice. And if you do, it's fine to share it. It's not like you can't at all. But try to pull information out of the other person first in order to get kind of their buy-in with what's going on, okay? And the last thing that these coaching skills can help you develop is, with all of the above, just greater connection with this person so that you can work together more effectively and you've got all of these other elements in place for the two of you, okay? So some foundational skills for coaching. So these are some of the things that we would ask you to consider in order, and we're going to go into these a little bit more as we're talking. The first three at the top here on the slide in bold, explaining how to improve these skills for yourself in order to improve these relationships, okay? So on this slide here, though, here are the kind of five, though, total foundational skills for coaching: designing the relationship and making it effective for you, talking about how you work together instead of just actually working together, like talk about how you need to work together effectively. Active and effective listening, curiosity, being curious, asking questions versus telling what to do, using your intuition about what may be going on with them, or gosh, this person seems unsettled or angry or whatever it is, and paying attention to that instead of just stepping over it. And then finally, the self-management, again, so that you don't just let your anger out when it's not the right time. And also like take time to listen to them first if that's the appropriate thing to do at the moment. So all of these things, these skills can help you deal with difficult coworkers and employees because it can help you diffuse these really challenging situations. So if you lean on these a little bit more, instead of just kind of like knee-jerk reacting or shooting from the hip, it will help you be more effective with them, okay? So let's talk about these three critical coaching skills that will help you improve your communication. We're going to focus on these three in the next few slides here, okay? Designing the relationship, active listening, and then curiosity, okay? So designing the relationship, this is the first one we want to discuss. And here's the deal is, it's basically about talking and discussing. It's almost like you would have a team charter. If you were getting together to work, with several other coworkers as a team or employees, you would want to, it's more effective to sit down and talk about, okay, what's our goal? What is our mission here? whose strength is, being more detail oriented. We need that person to work on the details. We need this person to work on strategy. So ideally, when you're creating teams, you want to think about and have some agreements about how you kind of play in the sandbox, if you will, and be effective. The same goes for these one-on-one relationships with people as well, especially if it's someone who you're having trouble with. If you can take a step back and kind of figure out, okay, how can we redesign our relationship? That can be really helpful. So if you take a look at this slide here, you can come up with together some agreements to work together more effectively. And at least on your part, you can start to think about this. Even if you don't feel like you can talk to them directly about it right away, you could approach it kind of gently with them and talk about, one of the challenging issues maybe that you have, okay? But the ideal would be, if you look on this slide, is to be able to cover all of these pieces in order to design the relationship more effectively. And these are some of the agreements, okay, to work together more effectively, the things that you can discuss together, okay, on how to kind of fix what's going on. So first of all, you want to ask them their opinion first. Like if you're going to bring this up, oh gosh, it's like a tense relationship or whatever, like, how do you think we're working together? What needs to change? Are there things that you need differently or, from me? Do we need to adjust our deadlines or something like that? Like, don't just barge in there with, here's my opinion, here's what we need to do, but ask them their opinion first, even when it's an employee, because empowering them to come up with solutions first can be much more effective than just laying it on them. They will be more defensive if you just come at them with it. The second thing is, if you can talk about establishing some guidelines for how you communicate, how you handle tasks. Do you need to do it mostly via email? Or are you an email person and they're a talk on the phone person, and that's part of the problem? Get that out on the table. And how do you want to handle meetings? Is it frustrating or not working because you guys are meeting too often or too infrequently, and they're kind of a high touch person that needs a little bit more guidance, whatever it is. You can also talk about how to set boundaries. So for example, if they like to talk a lot and talk things through, it's okay for you to say, look, first thing in the morning, though, I need a couple hours to just get my head on straight and like get through emails or whatever it is. So you can also ask for and set the boundaries so that you guys can work together effectively and say, look, if I can't talk to you right now, I'm just going to say, like, can't chat at this moment. Can we talk a little bit later today or whatever it is? Get it out on the open. And make an agreement for how to handle conflict, disagreements, or feedback. Is it okay if I come to you with some feedback sometimes? Can we agree that that's okay as long as we do it in a constructive manner that's open and positive? So this would be ideal to be able to have that kind of relationship as well too. Okay, so the second piece in terms of designing the relationship is if you can work through each of these issues, or I would say kind of like these pieces of the relationship, if you will. You want to talk about your objectives and your tasks. Okay, what do we need to get done here? The roles that you each can play in the relationship or in the project that you're working on based on your strengths. So be open about what your strengths are and how you think they can help, and vice versa. Get them to do the same thing. Talk about the challenges that you've maybe encountered in the past and may encounter in the future, and how do you want to handle them differently? How do you track milestones on your project or your task? How do you guys know that you're moving forward and making progress? What are some ground rules, kind of like we talked about in terms of boundaries before, and meetings and communication? Oh, and Lauren, if you can start to set up the second poll, that would be great. And this will be our last poll for the day. Um, Meetings and communication. Again, how do we want to communicate effectively? Do we need to meet, less frequently or more frequently? Or gosh, are our meetings going on too long and we have to have a stricter agenda? So I'm curious, and this is a meaty question, how many people on the call today have developed some sort of checklist, either for a team or a professional relationship? So let's just do that. And I'm curious how many people have actually done something like this before. Kudos to you if you have. Please know that not many people have, so it's okay if you haven't.
Hi, everyone. Our poll says 38% yes. Oh, shifting a little bit. 36% yes, 64% no.
Gotcha. I know you have to give it just enough time for everybody to to figure it out. Okay, so for those of you who have done this before, fantastic. Please feel free to add to your list if there's anything new here, and share, additional questions in the chat box at the end as well. And those of you who haven't, these are good tools for you to start thinking about and moving in the right direction. And keep in mind, everybody, I don't expect you to be able to cover all of these like all at once. It can be something that occurs over time. Part of what you want to do is you want to try to think about and identify what's really going wrong based on these issues. This can kind of be a checklist for red flags. What's going on between the two of us that is an issue based on this list? And then you can tackle that one first, okay? In terms of designing the relationship too, 4 needs of followers. Let's take a look at this. So what I want to say with this one, everybody, is this is basically a diagram that explains the 4, basic needs of followers or employees, if you will, okay? But I would assert that this goes towards coworkers as well. It's not just about your employees. We all want these 4 things in our jobs in some way, shape, or form. Okay, we want to have, a sense of compassion from our boss, from our coworkers, and from our organization. Friendship, maybe not as much there, right? But at least some sense of camaraderie, right? The hope they want to have, or I would say every employee and professional wants to have some sense of direction and like faith in the organization that things are going to work out, and the guidance. Stability here on the bottom left, have that sense of security, strength, and like peace in what they're doing, and then trust here on the top left as well, okay? So this is one of the things, again, that you can use as a checklist to say, what is going on with this relationship for me with this particular person that might be lacking that I can help provide to the relationship? Or if it's an employee, you can find out from them what's going on. Are they freaking out because, gosh, we're going through a transition at work and the stability is kind of shaky, and that's part of what's making them frustrated and kind of agitated, okay? So this basic model here can help you understand and identify what the difficult employee or coworker might need, whether it's from you or somebody else, in order to feel a little bit better and kind of tone things down a little bit, okay? So finally, in terms of designing the relationship, and then we'll go to number 2 here, the critical coaching skills, and talk about active listening. But finally, with designing the relationship, this helps so much because you will have improved relationships because it empowers each person to take responsibility. So when you're asking them what their opinion is too, and you all are coming up with some agreements, you guys are both like empowered to take responsibility for your behavior more, okay? And that's part of what helps enormously about this versus, oh, I'm just going to let it slide and I'm just going to get away with, not behaving correctly. It establishes clear boundaries for like a safe space to work, if you will. And I would suggest, by the way, that the very last bullet point here, that you periodically update it as your needs and desires change. So if your project changes, you may need to talk about this again and, okay, how do we reorganize what we do together? Or if there's a transition or change in the department or something like that, just keep in mind that it's kind of a living, organic thing that can change and adjust over time. And it's helpful to keep that in mind as well, okay? So let's talk next about the second skill, and this is active listening, okay? And I just love this picture because I have a 10-year-old boy, and he doesn't necessarily look like that, but it reminds me of that old phone game telephone. I think it's so cute. So active listening, most of you probably know what this is, or have heard the term at least. So as we know, everything in the workplace involves communication, and of course these days it's all different ways: IM, chat, texting, everything else, okay? And two-way communication is critical in the way that it can improve or impact, I should say, efficiency and effectiveness. It makes a huge difference in terms of how we feel about our work as well. And a lot of us probably think, oh yeah, I'm a good listener, yeah, I'll sit and listen to somebody all day long or whatever it is. But not everyone actually naturally knows how to listen well. And in coaching school, at least for me, they taught us how to listen more effectively so that you're not just listening to like what's going on in your own head, but you're able to pick out what's really going on for another person, even in terms of like what they're not saying to you. Okay, so there are 3 basic levels of listening in coaching from CTI. That's the coaching school that I attended. So this comes from that framework. So level 1, the first level of listening is internal listening. Okay, and what we want to do here is we want to reduce that. The internal listening is like what you're thinking and what's going on in your own head. Like, gosh, I'm really hungry. Gosh, what this person is saying is really annoying, or whatever is going on in your own head, whether it's something about what you need to do differently or your response to them and preparing it in your head. I know I do that all the time, right? Instead of having that internal listening, you need to try to reduce that and kind of shut it down. Okay. And you can focus on like whatever it is you're thinking, like, I'm hungry. Okay, I need to eat something after this. But then your goal is to get back with the other person and get back to truly listening to what's going on with them, kind of get back to, over there with them, if you will. Okay. So here are some examples of that internal listening. That sounds hard. It's your opinion or your judgment or your needs, or like we said, thinking about what you want to say next. You want to tone that down. The next one is focus listening. Excuse me. Level 2 is focus listening, where you're focused on the other person and you're really listening to each word, everybody, but you're also paying attention to their nonverbals and the nuances of the conversation. Like they might be saying one thing, like they're happy or they're okay with something, but their face is squunched up and they don't look like it, or their arms are crossed, and you can kind of tell that's not really what's going on. And so you want to reduce level 1 and work to develop, first of all, your level 2 listening skills. What are they saying to you that you might miss if you weren't really paying attention? What have they been saying so far that you may have missed by paying attention to their nonverbals or even just kind of their energy? Okay. And in terms of the 3 levels of listening here, let me put this up here, is global listening. Okay. So the global listening is the energy between the two of you, how it's changing and shifts in their attitude or the mood or the tone of the conversation. Okay. So this one is kind of even deeper. And this is the one where your intuition comes in. And when someone, by the way, everybody, is difficult and maybe upset or frustrated, you need to go to listening first. Okay, listening to them first to let them vent and get it off their chest will help diffuse the situation enormously. This does not mean it's okay for someone to berate you. That's not what I'm talking about. But if there's some frustration there and you can kind of sense it, you want to go to paying attention to the energy or the tension in the room or whatever it is and ask them about it. Like, hey, let's pause here for a second. Is everything okay? Like, does something need to be different, or, how are you feeling? Okay. So I want you all to just think about right now for a second for me. Do you believe you have effective listening skills or not? Because I'm going to show you this tool that you can use in order to kind of test yourself with it next. Okay. So I would just say for everybody, put in terms of like on a scale of 1 to 10. And Lauren, you know what? There's another poll here, and I forgot to give it to you. So let's just skip it for the moment. I want you guys to think about it, okay? And we can share it closer to the end if we want to. But I want you to think about effective listening skills, and if you think you have them, based on, okay, the 3 levels of listening that we just talked about. Now, how do we do this? Okay, so here are some of the tools. I'm going to put all of these up here so we can take a look at them. How do we do this? So first of all, one of the things here, if you look on the slide, is to set the tone of the conversation before you start. So if you want the tone to be better, more calm, safer, less tense, whatever it is, especially if you have to tell someone that, something that's touchy that might hurt their feelings or whatever, tell them that in advance and let them know, hey, I need to talk to you about something that may be difficult to hear. Is that okay with you? Ask permission, okay? Can I talk to you about something that's kind of touchy and difficult and I actually feel a little bit uncomfortable about or sharing with you? Can we do that right now? Is this a good time? When you ask permission from someone, they're most likely going to say yes, right? Okay. But when you ask permission, you've gotten their buy-in and they're going to be more likely to be open and receptive to what you're saying. Okay. And Lauren, perfect. It looks like you're doing the poll. Thanks for that. So the second thing you can do, and then we'll do the poll in just a second, everybody, if you believe you have effective listening skills. The second thing you need to do, especially when a situation is tense, everybody, is be quiet. Still your body, not just your words, but slow down and like sit kind of still and sit back if that's better for you to kind of be relaxed. Be calm and go slowly with the conversation. Be mindful of what you're saying and deliberate about, the words that you're choosing. Don't step over anything. Like if there's something they bring up and they keep rushing past it, and they keep bringing it up though, say, wait a minute, you keep talking about this and I want to make sure we get it kind of out in the open, okay? And you can slow them down a little bit if needed. And as we said before, ask a question rather than give advice. Try all of these tools in order to change the dance that you guys are doing to improve it. So Lauren, if you could share the results, I'm so impressed. You are fixing my error here.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Yeah, I love it.
80% yes and 20% no.
Okay, good. That's awesome. So if any of these things, in terms of those who feel like they're good at this, if any of these tips resonate with you as, ooh, this is something I need to change or tweak or do a little bit more of, write that down, okay? And for those of you that feel like, not so much, then I want you to really pay attention to these slides because there is a difference between these 3 levels of listening, and you want to make sure that you practice them on a regular basis, okay? Let me think if there's anything else I wanted to share about the listening. No, I think this is good. The one thing that I do want you to encourage all of you to do, I should say, is this asking permission, like, hey, I just want to check in with you on something, or, and say, can we talk about this now? Sometimes they may say, no, not now is not a good time. And you may need to talk to them later about it. Talk to them in private about it, whatever it is. But be mindful of when you're discussing these kinds of things too. Be mindful of the location, if it's one-on-one or not, just there's a right time and place for everything. Okay. So one of your homework assignments is to complete this active empathic listening scale. There is actually a handout, everybody, that is uploaded in the GoToMeeting. This link is here in the PowerPoint, but it's also in the handout as well. And what I want you to do for homework is identify your 2 lowest areas on this scale and how you can improve those. If you need to email me a copy because you have trouble getting the handout or whatever, feel free to ask me, not a problem. But it is in the handout, and it's just a quick online tool that's free, really, really helpful to help you assess where you may be able to improve your listening skills, okay? And then finally, in terms of the active listening, there's another exercise that you can do. And I actually do these in workshops with MBA students most frequently when we're doing and working on their peer coaching programs and teaching them how to be a peer coach. Have a close friend or family member tell you about a problem they're struggling with, and practice only reflecting what they say and paraphrase it. Don't ask any questions, don't give advice. And then you could take it a step further and you could just only ask questions but not give advice. And I got to tell you, this might sound like, oh, that's so basic. Why would I do this? It is so hard for all of the people in the room to not give advice. They're just chomping at the bit. So this is actually a very powerful exercise that can help you enormously be more coach-like in your communication and come across in a more effective way, especially with someone who's having a hard time or who's being difficult, okay? So finally, our third critical coaching skill is going to be curiosity and how to use that effectively to diffuse these tense situations, okay? So curiosity, just in a nutshell, is being curious, right, and asking questions versus judging or being angry. And as we all know, this can help diffuse a difficult situation, okay? So a couple things, and let me just pull everything up here on the slide here. So how can you do this? You can ask permission before sharing, just like we said a few minutes ago. But the second thing here on the slide, everybody, is to ask powerful questions instead of, like we said, giving advice. But there's also a difference between a regular kind of yes or no question and a powerful question. A powerful question is an open-ended question. It's kind of childlike. It has no judgment and it allows other people to kind of get it off their chest or even like brainstorm ideas or explain something or identify a solution. So it's open-ended. It's not yes or no. And here's some examples here. How can we improve our working relationship? Or what's the best way to accomplish this goal without conflict? Or just leave out the without conflict, best way to accomplish this goal. And you'll notice, everyone, as you look at these, that inherent in these questions is the assumption that we can work this out. It's not a yes or no, well, we can't work together and that's it. It's an assumption that, hey, we can figure this out. How do we do it? And what do we need to do differently? Okay. So powerful questions are open-ended and they allow for dialogue and ideas to come forward and flow versus the yes or no. Okay. There's also other questions, information gathering, and just curious questions versus, the standard kind of powerful questions. So how much time do you need to spend on this? Who can help us with this? And just curious questions. What would it look like for us to, work together more effectively? So these are some other examples of some powerful, curious questions that you can use with people in order to pull, again, the information and ideas out of them. Okay. And just really quickly, I wanted to share with you guys if anyone needs additional help with any specific situations here, because I realize that the advice that I'm giving today is, it's generalized for a lot of different situations. But some of you may have something that's really specific, like someone who is not going to take some of this stuff well, and you need like something that's a little bit deeper or in depth to help figure out how to work through that. I'm happy to do a free career strategy session. Just email me and I'm happy to talk with you about that to kind of help you get that specific advice. Okay. As we talked about at the very beginning, just some of the additional critical coaching skills that I want to just share with you before we start to wrap up and do the question time here is the intuition. Okay. It's a good idea to listen to your intuition. A lot of times we kind of may know what's going on with this person, but we're just not paying attention to it. Instead of overanalyzing something, sometimes it's good to just let it simmer overnight before you address it. Sit quietly with it, talk with someone, journal, approach the situation calmly, even if you have to do it days later. But listen to your intuition about what may be going on and how you need to handle this. The intuition can be very, very powerful. Okay. Also, the self-management, you really want to pay attention to this as well. It can be easy to get frustrated quickly with someone who is difficult. Try not to judge and instead try to empathize and ask questions. I had a client who she had a really difficult boss who was just driving her nuts. And one day when we were talking about this, I was like, you know what? Let's try empathizing with what may be going on with her and where she's coming from. And she's like, I don't think she has much of a social life. I think she's kind of unhappy in these ways too. And just having that additional empathy for her, it didn't fix it perfectly, but it helped enormously because instead of being defensive or upset by how their relationship was going, she was able to diffuse it more by being a little bit more empathetic about, hey, I don't need to take this personally. She's got other things going on in her life that are impacting why she's behaving or how she's behaving. And the last piece here is that effective communication. You want to be assertive and understanding at the same time. So effective communication involves at all times show understanding, also stating the facts about what's going on, trying to take the emotions and the feelings out of it. And then you always want to offer a resolution at the end. This is, like we said, after asking some questions, but have some possible resolutions too. Don't just sit there staring at each other, come up with some solutions and think about them in advance so that you're prepared to share with them if they're not sure what to do next. Okay. All right. So I want you all to get out your pen and paper or write it on your computer, whatever is best for you. These are 2 possible action steps that you can take. I want you to come up with whatever works for you. You can practice the listening exercise like we talked about with a friend or family member, only asking questions, don't giving advice. You can complete the empathic listening scale, do the coaching session with me, whatever works. But I'm going to give you a moment here. I just want you to think about the 2 action items that you will take in the next couple of weeks, okay? Or actually, let's say in the next week. All right. And before we get to the Q&A here, I want to share with you while you're thinking about your questions, and feel free to share them in the chat box. And Lauren is just going to read those to us as they come in. I want to remind you, this is my favorite quote. I use it in all of my presentations, that the greatest risk in life is not taking one. This is the thing. And the quote, everybody, that has always gotten me through the times when I wanted to stay in my comfort zone and not try to push through, okay, I have to deal with this difficult situation at work, but I'd rather, avoid it. You've got to take a risk. Without risk, there's no reward, right? And you don't want to say, like, in 5 more years or whatever, after having had to work with this person, it's still bad and you didn't do anything about it, okay? So keep in mind that you want to take this risk, and you can take it in baby steps and in increments, and that's fine using these steps. But do something, take a step, okay? All right, and I wanted to mention just real quick, and then we'll go to our Q&A. And Lauren, I think this is the right date. I double checked it, but we have our our Commodore Career Intensive coming up. It's basically, if you look at this slide here, everybody, it will help you identify your ideal career. It's a 4-session live webinar series with me. And what I mean by live is we do record them, but it's interactive on the calls, okay? And it follows our career direction program to help you identify the right career path for you. It's fantastic. It gets rave reviews, including from some of our alumni board members who have participated in it. It starts May 9th. The price is here at the bottom, and our clients have secured positions at these organizations. It is a fantastic program. Feel free to email me with any questions about it to get the registration link, or if you want to talk further about it, I'm happy to chat with you. Okay, really, really good program though. All right, so let's do the Q&A, Lauren, and if you can just kind of field those, and I know normally it might take a minute for people to kind of formulate their thoughts here, but I can stay for at least another, 5 minutes or so.
Absolutely, and you were right. It starts May 9th, and it runs May 9th, 16th, 30th, and June 13th.
Awesome.
Also, we've had a few folks ask to say that they can't see the handout in the webinar dashboard, so I'll go ahead and email that right after the webinar finishes to everybody in case they didn't see it, and then I'll explain in that email that later this week you'll get the archived link to the entire presentation as well.
Okay, good. Yeah, because handouts are new for me. I don't even know, how to post them and all of that. So totally get it. Sorry, guys, and we'll send that to you for sure. And feel free to ask me for it too, either way.
Okay, great. So our questions are rolling in. First question is, I'm curious how these rules apply or have to adapt for remote teams where all communication is via phone or video conferencing.
Oh, great question. So the only way I would say, and then Lauren, feel free to chime in too if you have anything too, but the main way I would say it would be different, and most likely the only one, actually there's two now that I'm thinking about it. So first of all, the level 3 listening, kind of listening when you're on the phone, especially obviously if you don't have the video conferencing and you're just on the phone, you're going to have to learn to listen a little bit better just on the phone instead. You won't have those nonverbals, but you can still tell based on people's tone and hesitation and kind of cadence. So you just have to get a little bit better about that because you might not have the nonverbal cues sometimes. If it's a difficult person and you feel like you need those, try to get them to do video conferencing more often so you can see what's going on and establish that connection. And finally, if it's something that's a really touchy topic and you think, it needs to be in person, then figure out a way to, I know this might not always work in some cases, but talk to them in person if you can, travel there or vice versa, or maybe you have a meeting coming up, or worst case scenario, try to do it video conference instead. But think about how they are too, because in some cases for people, and this is sort of the flip side of it, and it's going to, again, depend on your preference and what you think might work best for them. In some cases, people might prefer talking about something touchy over the phone because there's that barrier and it's a little bit less personal. And so if you think someone might be highly sensitive about something, you may want to say, hey, can we talk about this over the phone first and then maybe meet in person? So it is a little bit of a, situational response, but those would be the basic, gist. The rest, all of the rules would apply, I think would be the same. Great question.
Okay, great. Next question is, what is your advice for hyper-competitiveness among peer coworkers?
Okay, that's great. So in some cases, it's appropriate. You said hyper, so obviously that means that it's overly so. But in some cases, competitiveness is supposed to be how you all work together, whether it's a sales environment or whatever. But if it's too much, try to understand where this person is coming from. So try to first understand who they are and what type of personality they are. They might be more of a type A person, and one of their strengths, like on the Strengths Finder assessment, for example, may be competition, and that's just like who they are and how they come across, and you can't change that completely. But you could have a conversation with someone, let's say, and like let them know and say, look, I totally get and I appreciate this as your strength, and all of that. And sometimes it's, makes me a little bit more tense or uncomfortable or something. So is there a way that, sometimes when we're meeting together that we can tone it down a little bit? Ask them if there's something that they can adjust a smidge, but acknowledge, what's going on with them. And this may be, part of their kind of persona, if you will. If it's something that's really, really bad and you're an employee and you feel like, I've tried to talk to them or whatever, or I can't talk to them because they're just going to get defensive, it's totally okay to bring in your boss if you have to and talk with them kind of offline about it. Or if it's really, really difficult, bring in HR. So don't hesitate to, bring in other people if your efforts to, kind of open up the communication aren't working well. But that's how I would approach it as a start. It's just kind of, let them know that you appreciate it, but sometimes, you need to talk things through a little bit more with them. Give them a little bit of feedback.
Okay, great. Next question. If you're on a project or a structural team where your team lead is being an obstructionist or not informing you of things or keeping you out of the loop, and you might be the subject matter expert, but they have seniority, they've been at the organization longer, how can you try to resolve this without involving upper management?
Sure. So ideally, so that you don't have to involve others, is go to them directly and just kind of let them know how you feel a little bit, and just ask. I feel a little bit out of the loop, and as a result, I don't feel like I can be as effective as I'd like to be because I'm kind of in the dark about certain things, and I tend to be the kind of person that does better and performs better with additional context. So, is there a way that we can, and then offer up some solutions? Is there a way that, you can share the meeting minutes with me on a regular basis? Or, after you have your meeting with your other team leads or whatever it is, can, we chat for just 2 minutes on the phone about what happened? Let them know like a little bit about how it makes you feel and that it may be impacting their work performance, or your work performance, not blaming them, of course, but saying, hey, can you do this just quick, easy thing for me? Because I feel kind of out of the loop and I'm not able to like get a grasp or a handle on what's going on, and just see what they have to say. And then if it doesn't go well, or they don't respond effectively, then you may have to get upper management involved. But keep it short, sweet, and simple, and ask for what you need.
I think that sounds great, and your idea about making it about how to be most effective and strategic, I think, keeps it really non-emotional.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
Next question. Oh, sorry. Next question is, you mentioned trust in your designing the relationship slide. What if you've witnessed a great deal of gossiping by coworkers? How do you develop a trusting relationship with this person?
Yeah, that can be very tough and interesting. So one of the things that you don't want to do is engage in the gossip, like just avoid the conversation, leave the room if you have to, whatever can make sense, or change the topic. If the person is I'm guessing this is your question, if the person is a gossipy person and you feel like you can't trust them, like here's the bottom line, you're not going to be able to change them completely, right? So two things. Number one, don't share with them things that you think is not okay to be spread around the office. If you just know that it's, be choosier about what you share with them, I would say, and just be cautious about it. But then the second thing is, I wouldn't go to them and say, okay, you're gossipy and this is a problem, but say like, look, this information, I need to share some information with you that actually really needs to be confidential. And it's very important that it, stays that way. So can I share that with you and feel comfortable knowing that it'll stay between us? And then see what they have to say, and you could try it out, kind of test the waters with something that's not as big of a deal. Like if it did get spread around, and kind of see what happens. But I would just be direct about the things that can't be shared, and see what happens kind of as a starting point, and see how they respond. And then if there is an issue and it does get shared, go back and talk about it with them and say, look, we've got to have this confidentiality in certain cases, or else it's going to impact what we're doing here. End of story.
Okay, great. Last question. Someone had brought up a really good point about how this is really great for yourself as a roadmap, but also for teams that you may manage. Can you give us
Yes.
some tips about how this might be great to deploy to your team to build this kind of roadmap and atmosphere and environment throughout your office?
Sure, sure. That's a great question. So I would use the same, tips and advice, but just bring it to the team level, if you will. So I would so have your agreement, like a team charter, like we talked about designing the relationship at the beginning. I would do that for your team and say, okay, everybody, let's figure out how we can work together effectively first. Okay. And I'm just going to put this other slide back up, Lauren, too, so that they can check this out if they need to. Talk to your team about it and say, how do we work together effectively? But include the listening in there too and say, look, I want us to be better at listening. And here's, 3 ways that we can do this. So let's really pay attention to and get better at actively listening to each other and people's ideas and provide constructive criticism versus, difficult feedback. Ask permission beforehand. So put all of the tools, but just into the team context and meet with everybody as a team before you get going on your project or whatever it is and come up with what these ground rules are using the outlines or the tips in the slides. Okay. And just do it at that level and come up with, okay, these are our agreements as a team, and you can put them up on the wall if that's appropriate, or just have everybody say, yes, okay, we're going to agree to all of these and put them at the top of every one of your agendas so that people remember them. It's a great idea. Okay, good.
Fantastic. Well, Hallie, thank you for sharing your wisdom and encouragement and really tangible points today to help us be our
Sure.
best professionally. I want to encourage you all again to check out all our career resources and events we have at buconnect.com/career, and remind you again, we will send out the handout immediately after this, the archive link this week when I'm able to get that up on our web page for you all. And then it will also include a really brief feedback, because we're always trying to survey alumni to make sure that we are offering our best offerings for you. And so thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Have a great day.